Join Jesus where he's already at work. We dream of the day where every home in America is adopted by one or more persons living the prayer, care, share lifestyle. Our host, Gary Kendall, began Love KC with a desire to see every home in Kansas City prayed for. Join with him to make this happen. Now, on to the Bless Podcast.
Well, welcome to the Bless Podcast, where we join Jesus where he's already at work, where we live, learn, work, and play. And it's exciting to be able to welcome you as you listen to more stories about neighboring and how we can live out this Jesus mission in the places where we may live, in the places where we are working, in the places where we frequent regularly, where we're learning or where we're playing. All of these are areas that are mission fields for us. And today we're going to talk about one that is maybe well known within the city of Kansas City, but my suspicion is maybe we know the name, but we might not know the mission, and we may not know how we can fit into that mission. So I want to welcome Karl Ploeger, who is with us from City Union Mission. Welcome, Karl.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Did I pronounce your name right?
It's pronounced Ploeger.
Ploeger. Welcome.
Don't worry. It's a good German pronunciation.
Okay. All right. I'll have to work on my German. And Brooke Powell, my co-host. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you. It's always great to be here.
So for those of you who are joining in, you can find the Bless Podcast on your Google Play or Apple iTunes, or maybe even other platforms that you might frequent or use. And go there, look for BLESS, and then press subscribe. You'll get all the new ones that come out. And you can also find us on the Facebook page, Love KC Today. So, Karl, as I was thinking about City Union Mission, why don't you first start with just maybe an overview so that someone who doesn't have context for our conversation today could kind of get a little bit of understanding of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, great. Well, that's about a 30-minute question by itself, but I'll try to make it short and sweet.
Sure.
So we are a 97-year-old rescue mission here in Kansas City, Missouri. We're in the heart of the city physically, and we'll talk about a little bit more about our reach later on. But we're located 11th and Troost is our men's shelter, and then we're generally around that area, Paseo, Troost, around 10th to 12th Street. We were started 97 years ago on Main Street by Reverend David Bulkley, who just had a passion for the homeless and for the men at that time. Really started down in the West Bottoms area of Kansas City. And we've grown significantly since then. So we continue to have a rescue mission for men. We also have a long-term care program for men. So those that choose to come and live at City Union Mission can do it anywhere from 8-9 months to really more up to 16 months, and work on just a host of life skill issues across the board. And we have those similar programs for single women and families. So within both our ministry for men and ministry for women and families, we'll work on vocational training, educational, life skills, a lot of addiction issues when you get into the homeless community. So work on addiction issues. And then we are faith-based. And so if you come to the mission, you're going to hear about Jesus. You're going to hear about the salvation story and the good news story of Jesus Christ and how they can help transform your life. And so it's really a hand in glove, how faith can impact your life, but then we also work on health, wellness for that transformation. And so, that's a short answer. We also have a community assistance programs, a food pantry, a mission Christmas, which we serve about 5,000 community members that are not homeless, but on the poor side of the economic scale. And then the last big area is we have a camp called Camp Concito, which is in Warsaw, Missouri. We have 800 acres just outside of Warsaw. And on a typical year, COVID aside, we'll have over 600 kids come from the Kansas City metro area that will travel down to Warsaw to have that camp experience.
And when I was pastoring at Indian Creek Community Church in Olathe, we sent our youth to Camp Concito to serve as counselors, and they had great experiences there. So it just reminds me of how that the good deeds, that you're doing go with the good news, and that they work hand in hand to see the transformation of people. It takes both.
Gary, I probably get 3 or 4 letters a month from individuals who either went to camp and saw their life changed, and years later, some of them, 60, 70 years later, have that reference of, I remember when I went to Camp Concito down in Warsaw, where they were counselors, just as the example you just gave.
Yeah.
And where, their life was touched, or they had a family member that was a part of it. So camp's a big deal for us. We love to be a part of that and, see those kids. And we use it for other purposes too, beyond the summer, but its primary function is, for kids, and to see that connection and hear about Jesus.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's so awesome. I love how you guys don't just focus on the spiritual, but practical as well, because God isn't just about the spiritual. Like, he knows we have real needs. And many times, when you meet the practical need, then they're open to hear about the spiritual needs. So that's really awesome that you guys are doing that. There's a lot of people who watch our podcasts and maybe are watching now, and they're looking for somewhere to serve. And so I know you guys are doing a lot. So what would you say are your greatest needs right now, of where you guys could use more help?
Right. Well, let me answer your question 2 ways. In terms of greatest needs for physical property, we can always use things like toilet paper, socks, warm clothes, winter's coming on, bedding, all single beds at the mission. So just those practical needs that we all need to function is a part of what the mission needs. And we feed them, 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. So
how do you guys get those materials? Do churches do drives for you, or could they do them for you?
Yeah. So a great question. And it's really across the board. So in some cases we buy it because we get donations, of cash donations that come to the mission. And if we need, socks or, coats for our residents, our guests, we're going to go out and purchase those items. But a lot of them also come through donation drives. We do quite a few church donation drives. Used to be the old school way, was a barrel in the lobby, and you'd promote it, and people would bring their stuff and they throw it in the barrel. And then COVID hit, and that changed everything. And we're still kind of in that in-between world. So we can still do a barrel in the lobby. Most churches are back, to meeting on a Sunday morning. But one of the things that came out of COVID that we'll continue to do long-term is we started taking our City Union Mission trucks, putting them in the parking lot of the churches, opening the door, and typically on a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, we'll basically have a fill a truck and let people come. And in our case, we have the mission, which is food and clothing items, but we also have our city thrift stores, which is our thrift stores. We have 3 of them in Kansas City. And those, we can take donations of household goods and even furniture, those items that we could turn around, resell in the store. And we would then, from the income from that, it comes back to the mission. Brooke, then to answer the kind of really the question you asked me on how to get involved is, we do have a lot of volunteers at City Union Mission. Now, we're still migrating COVID in some of those. And so we still have those restrictions to some degree, but we are back open for volunteers. And volunteers can take really a variety of looks. On one case, we have what we call impact volunteers. And let's say you have a youth group and you guys want to come down and help in the Mission Christmas store, or maybe you want to do landscaping or work in the summer, spring and fall, paint a room, that kind of, it's more event driven and short term.
Okay.
And so those are impact volunteers. We have a pay and serve. So if you'd like to pay for a meal and then help serve that at our family center, that's a great way to, frankly, get to, meet our guests and be interacting with them and have a level of communication. And so that's one option.
When did you say you guys serve food? Is it Monday through Sunday, or?
We have 3 meals a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
Breakfast, noon, and breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Wow.
One of the things I like that you shared, Karl, is that there's a lot of different ways people can serve, because people have all different kinds of giftedness. They have different passions, they have different interests, they have different time schedules. And one of the things that we're always encouraging people to do is to really find a place that you feel like you can connect. Like that place is not only has a need, but you feel like you're the person who can meet that need. And then to lean in on a regular basis, so you build relationship. Those are things we're always teaching.
So Gary, you led right into my next element. We have what's called high impact volunteers, and the people that are listening to this and going to be exposed to this, I'm going to just take as a broad comment, are going to largely be a faith community. Right. A high impact volunteer goes through an application process, and part of that is, do they align with our beliefs, our faith beliefs? And then part of that is the commitment. And a high impact volunteer tends to be somebody that's going to have a more regular interaction at the mission, as well as with our guests. A good example of a high impact volunteer is during the Christmas season, when our community assistance program is open and we have people from the area coming in, getting vouchers for the Christmas store, for holiday meals. They'll talk to our staff members, but then they'll also talk to a high impact volunteer and have a faith conversation. So they'll talk to them. Where's your walk? Are you saved? Do you want to know more about Jesus? And of course, the person's going to answer is going to be different in every conversation. But those individuals really get to have a true opportunity to share their faith, share the gospel. And if the person's already a believer, they get to pray with them. They get to lean into them. They get to encourage them. And so that's one example amongst many of where a high impact volunteer can come and meet and make a difference in a material way in a conversation.
Sometimes people can have an idea that they think they know what you do at City Union Mission. Maybe they've heard a commercial or they saw a commercial on TV. And by the way, you guys do some really good. I love your advertising. You've stepped it up a lot. I've been in town for 40 years, so I've seen a lot of improvement. But what do you find? I'm just curious. When you start talking to people, what is usually their biggest point of surprise? Like repeatedly, maybe they have the same kind of comment, like, I didn't know that. What is that for you?
Well, I'm going to try to give you 2 quick answers.
Okay.
One is mission specific, and one is about the guests that do come to the mission. People are always surprised at the scope and scale of City Union Mission. Yeah. We're 75% of the rescue beds in the Kansas City metro area. So when it comes to serving the poor,
so 75 of the whole percent of the whole city is
whole metro.
Wow.
We're 75%.
That's surprising to me.
Yeah, and we're the only rescue mission that has infirmary beds.
What's that?
Okay. Infirmary beds. So if you have some medical conditions and issues, depending upon what it is, we're not a hospital, but we do have health services within the mission. We have nurse on staff, and so we can handle some of those challenges that maybe other resources can't. So people are always surprised. It's an example of the camp. I mean, almost no one knows we have 800 acres in Warsaw, Missouri, right, with a church camp, and then just we have 19 different buildings and properties within Kansas City.
Wow.
Now, some of those are warehouse buildings and freezer lockers and those kinds of things. But the scope and scale is what surprises them. On the guest side, what really surprises most people is, for most individuals, a circumstance is not what brought them into the community of homelessness. It's not. It can happen, and it can be this way, but it's seldom, a piece of bad luck. Something happened. It's always a deeper set of consequences and decisions and process that led them to the state where they're homeless. And so it's back to us addressing vocational issues, educational issues, faith issues. Within the homeless community, 75% have addiction issues, and I'll flip that around. About 78% have addiction issues, and about 75% have some level of some mental health issues. So there's a large overlap even within that community. Right. And so those are drivers that are most common in why someone is on the streets and becomes homeless. Yeah. So Brooke, back to your comment, it is almost impossible to address someone's faith and belief system without being able to address some of those other issues that has put that into that circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we've kind of you've answered a lot of my next question, but I'm just curious if there's a pastor or church or even an individual believer, like, is there any other ways that you haven't mentioned how they can partner or get involved or serve?
Yeah, well, they can certainly donate. We do not take government funds. We are all privately funded through individuals, through churches, through companies, and grants and foundations. So those make up the funding for City Union Mission. We operate over $12 million annually as an operating budget. So faithful donors to the mission are welcome and needed for us to continue to serve the community we are.
How are you guys doing since COVID? Are you guys doing all right? Or
Kansas City is a gracious community. Today is the last day of our fiscal year. So tomorrow starts what we would call fiscal year 22, and fiscal year 21 will be a record donation revenue year.
That's wonderful.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, it is. A lot of people gave out a perceived need. And when I say perceived, it's really actual need. And Kansas City community stepped up. And so, it was a blessing to the mission because, of course, as you could expect, COVID disrupted everything about a communal living community.
Right.
And so they can donate, they can volunteer, they can go to cityunionmission.org, and there's a tab on there for volunteering, and they can see all the options of how to volunteer and the different levels of volunteering. And for some people, that can be very much of an ongoing, continuous relationship. And for others, it may be more of a 1 or 2 times, a year kind of project-based donation. Both help us, both are incredibly valuable to us. The third area is just as important as the other two, and that is pray for us. Pray not only collectively for City Union Mission, but pray for the guests that come into our facilities. One, that they want to stay, because we think the best place for them is not on the street, it's in the mission. And so we don't actively go to the homeless communities of Kansas City and give them food and blankets. And there are groups that do that, and we understand that, but we really don't want to enable somebody to live that lifestyle. We'd rather them come into the mission so that they can get case management, they can get medical services, and of course they can hear the faith message. So we want people not only to come to our short-term shelters, but use that as a platform to move them into our long-term care facilities.
That's amazing. It makes me think of whenever, I don't know, if you could give something away for free or selling them something, but when someone invests, so even them coming to your place, like they're making the decision to make the trek over there and to stay, it shows investment and it helps them, I think, to stay engaged. Right. That's really awesome.
Right. And of course, a lot of them, if it's cold, they're going to come in because they want to be cold. And that's good. And we've got to address their physical needs. But they're going to walk into and be paced in a conversation within the mission to really talk about how to transform their life in multiple ways.
We were thinking about doing this interview with you, Karl. I was thinking about the story of the Good Samaritan. And there's so many parallels. I'm sure that's probably a story you guys have told a lot and used a lot. But I thought about the fact that a lot of the people so we have 3,000 people who have adopted their neighborhoods, usually their physical neighborhoods in Love KC to do a pray, care, share lifestyle. So they usually use the tool blesseveryhome.com. And they go in and adopt their neighborhood. They have 5 neighbor names for which to pray every day. And then we encourage them to prayer walk their neighborhoods, et cetera, look for places to serve and build relationships, look for places to share. But as I was thinking about that particular emotion that I think a lot of our lights are comfortable with, we're not many times quite as comfortable with seeing the person in need who might be homeless. Right. And reaching out to help them. But that's what the Good Samaritan did. In that case, the person was also injured. And then they didn't stop with just helping them for the moment, but they gave of their own income to make sure that they were cared for, had a place to stay, et cetera. And I just see so many parallels. I think it's great that people in the suburbs, for example, I'll pick on them for a second, could prayer walk, care for their school, meet needs in their area. If they see maybe a widow in their neighborhood who needs, maybe they need for their wheelchair, they might need a ramp, they can help build that. Those are all really good things, and we should do those things. But sometimes if we see a person homeless, we might drive right by. And right. So the Good Samaritan story just really jumped out at me as it's a parallel, I think, to what we see today. And the question that Jesus was asking through the story is, are we too busy? Are we more like the ones who drove by? Because we have all these things we're trying to do. Are we too busy to really invest in our neighbor?
Well, and what makes that story really resonate, Gary, is the people that walked by were the quote faith leaders.
Exactly. Right.
That's the why I was bringing it up. Stopped first.
Right.
Right. Well, I'm going to kind of piggyback on your comment, because one of the reference verses that you hear fairly often at the mission when we talk to donors or what we're talking to staff is Matthew 25, and you get into verse 41 and 42, and there Jesus is talking about that when he was hungry and whether you fed him or not, and when he was thirsty, did you stop and give him clothes, and sick, and when he was in prison, right? Did you not look after me? And so that's also it's parallels to the Good Samaritan so much. And when you take care of one, you're taking care of me.
Yeah, you are. That's good.
So, Karl, I'm curious how you got involved. How did you get to where you are right now?
Sure. Well, first off, I had, through my church, I had been a donor to the mission. As a matter of fact, I coached a girls fast pitch softball team, competitive team for a while. And I brought the girls down for quite a few years. And we helped serve meals at the mission because we were suburban. My girls were mostly all from the suburbs. And so
I love that you did that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And they loved it too. And, so we went to the family center and they got to serve meals and talk to the women and the kids, and in some cases, some men that were there in the family center. So that was my first connection to City Mission, and just beyond just growing up in the metro and being generally familiar with it from commercials or conversation. But about 5 years ago, I felt the personal calling to the ministry. And at that time, I thought, that I would make a nice fair living for a few more years and then retire, and then begin kind of a career in the full-time ministry. And kind of not have to maybe worry about how much money I was making and that kind of thing. And I even started getting my master's degree in divinity from Liberty University online. And so that was kind of the path I was starting down. And then, plans change. And at the end of last year, I found myself looking for new employment due to COVID and the impact of COVID on my industry that I'd been in. And I was in marketing and advertising sales. So advertising sales is my background. And I had I had reached out to a friend of mine to say, hey, I'm going to apply for a job. I saw it online and you're connected on LinkedIn. Do you actually know that person? Can you make an introduction for me? And the response was, I don't know him at all. I just met him and got connected at some event or trade show. So I can't help you, but would you be interested maybe in a not-for-profit job? And I said, well, maybe, what do you got? And next thing I know, I'm applying, interviewing for the development officer's job at City Union Mission.
Wow.
And God just changed my plan. And so I went from thinking I would retire,
right,
and find my ministry vocation to I find my ministry vocation through the experience from the last 35 years in the secular community. Because in the development role that I have, we manage a lot of elements, but our primary function is to generate revenue, to meet with donors, communicate, tell the story of the mission, advertising and marketing. And so it was what I hope is a great fit for the mission. It's certainly a great fit for me.
I think that's great.
But man, God, so that retirement goal, I don't know how long that's going to be now. Won't be as soon as I thought, that's for sure. But it just changed my perspective quickly, and I was able to take my vocational objectives and skill set and now go, I'm going to put that into the ministry.
I think that's beautiful. I think that one of the ways that God works in our world is it's this beautiful blend of things that we would call secular and things that we would call sacred. I see more of a blurring of that line all the time, in that all of our work is sacred. Yes. And God uses the skill sets developed maybe in the workforce, and then is able to take those and use them inside of something that's more ministry related. And both the person and the ministry benefit from that. So I love that story. That's great.
Karl, I don't want to burst your bubble, but I don't know if we ever retire in the kingdom of God, do we? I don't know if he lets us.
Well, I've been blessed. I've gone on many, many international mission trips, and they're great. In fact, I'm going on one at the end of this month. I'm going back to the Dominican Republic. So I love the travel and the kind of the exotic component of that. But my pastor for my church, who I've been on many of those trips with, always said, I've heard him say it, dozens of times. Well, this is wonderful. Your real mission is back home. Your mission is in your neighborhood. It's in your community. And this should just inspire you to go back. And if you're willing to tell people about Jesus in a foreign country, you should absolutely be willing to tell people about Jesus, back home in your neighborhood, to your friends and family. And for a lot of us, it's just easier to talk to a stranger about it than your best friend in some cases. And so, I feel like I've hit the jackpot.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've done a lot of mission trips too, Karl, and been convicted about the fact that I wasn't living on mission at home as much as the people I was visiting. Like I went to help, I've been to China 17 times. I go to help the Chinese, and all I would see is they witness to everyone they talk to. Every need in the community they're addressing somehow by meeting a felt need. And this idea that we teach all the time now with Love KC, which is the pray, care, share lifestyle, works anywhere around the world. And it can work in our backyard, in our neighborhood. It can work at our workplace and anywhere. And by the way, there may be listeners who tuned in to hear about City Union Mission, but we have resources at lovekc.net that help a person to live their faith with confidence and know how to lead their friends to Jesus. And a lot of them are online tools. So you can watch videos, or you can read online tools, or you can actually download books like the Field Guide that talks about loving your neighbors to Christ. And you'll hear more stories like the ones that we've been telling today about people who are just really everyday people. They're followers of Jesus, but they're sharing their faith everywhere they go. And I think that's what happened in Acts and what needs to happen today.
Yeah. I think about your mom too, about the whole not retiring. I don't think she's ever going to Stop telling people.
My mom's 86, Carl, and she's going strong. She's a bundle of energy and spirit. Yes,
it's awesome. Well, if she needs an outlet, we got plenty of space for her.
Yeah. Hey, Carl, I wanted to ask you one of my favorite stories. I read the book, The Spiritual Roots of Kansas City.
Yeah.
Annika Bergen is actually a friend. I've met her, and Bill High is a person I've looked up to and have known for a long time. They did a great job with that book. And one of the stories that really captured me, because it has neighboring as a part of the story, is the story of Madam Chambers. And I know that also is a story that is dear to the heart of anyone, at City Union Mission. So I wondered if you could summarize that story for us.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. There was the leading madam of Kansas City in the early teens and through the early part of the 1920s was a lady by the name of Annie Chambers. And her brothel was down on Main Street, down in the red light district. And City Union Mission was founded by Reverend David Bulkley, who founded the mission. He was a Methodist minister, and he left his very large, very successful church because he just had a calling to help the men on Skid Row in Kansas City. And so he had the first rescue mission facility was, of course, in the red light district. And so it was next to Annie Chambers' house of prostitution.
Right.
And so they were next door neighbors. And one of the young prostitutes lost a child, a couple of months old. And she went to Reverend Bulkley and asked if he would even consider doing a funeral service for this child. And frankly, she thought he'd turn her down because she was a prostitute and, not kind of worthy. And of course, he graciously said, absolutely, and brought her in and demonstrated love to her. And the buildings were very close. It was row housing back in the day. And so the windows were open because there's no air conditioning. And Annie Chambers didn't feel worthy to come to the funeral, but she sat outside the window or through the windows in the buildings, and she listened to the service and was so moved by Reverend Bulkley that it began to change her life. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in that moment.
Right.
What happened is then over time, she and the Bulkleys became connected. There was even a fire where they came and were together and both reached out to the community. But Annie Chambers saw the transformational change that Jesus can make in your life. And she ended up becoming a believer. She closed the brothel. When she passed away, she inherited her building, her belongings, to City Union Mission. So in many, many ways in the mid-20s, a large part of our original funding came from the leading madam of Kansas City.
Yeah. Wow.
And our conference room there in our administration building, where we host a lot of events, is called the Annie Chambers Conference Room. We have a pretty nice sized picture of her on the wall. And so she's a constant reminder of Jesus changing the lives of someone that didn't think they would be worthy for that to happen, as well as just what can happen when you stay after somebody.
Yes.
I'll go back. While the transformation started when she heard that funeral service, it didn't just happen. She wouldn't burst through the door and say, "Hallelujah, I'm saved."
Right. Yeah.
It walked through the relationship that the Bulkleys started with her, and then over time, it grew into her understanding of what the salvation story looked like and what it would all be about.
It's so good for so many reasons. Like, no one's ever too far gone. It's like the story of the lost sheep, the shepherd going after the one, so that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is that just the continued, and you've already pointed out, the continued neighboring that took place. They actually physically were neighbors, and they cared for each other. When she became sick, they actually took her meals and kind of nursed her to health for a while. And it's just amazing that then she became this advocate for Jesus and also for the city.
And while she wasn't a believer for very long in life,
right?
You think about the impact she had on City Union Mission, and here we are talking about it.
Yes.
96, 97 years later,
right.
And the impact and the example and the story she had, not only on City Union Mission, but just the young ladies that she had influence over, and the contacts. It's a fun story to tell.
It is. It is.
Speaking of impact, and I don't know if this is necessarily measurable, but I mean, I didn't know until we got on this call that it was a 97-year-old ministry. I did not know that. So, but I'm just curious, like, I don't know if there's statistics, or if you could just, if you know, like, I don't know, the impact that City Union Mission has had on Kansas City.
Wow. I can't answer that. We currently average about 300 guests a night. So that wouldn't be true for the 97 years, but you've kind of inspired me, Brooke. I may, when I get off the call, multiply 300 times, however many days 97 years are, at least to get a ballpark, and then maybe take it down a little bit. But
so it's been consistently 300 a night for a long time.
For a while. I mean,
that's incredible.
And we didn't always have the family center. It was started as a men's rescue, and then the family center or women and children were added later. And to even to that interesting kind of a side point to that, the fastest growing segment of the homeless community is single women and women head of households.
Yeah.
Wow.
By far, not that the homeless community is not growing within men, but that women. And when you talk about the homeless community, women are particularly vulnerable when you get into that community and lifestyle. And so it's just so important for us. It's something that we continue to kind of struggle with, because, quite honest, we don't have the capacity to manage the demand from those segments like we want. And so, we're looking at what it would look like to build a new family center, and we're not ready to move forward with it, but it's certainly part of the conversation.
Well, for every person you help, you're not just helping that person. If they get back on their feet, you're helping one or two generations at a minimum from the people that they, end up intersecting with. Right. So it goes far beyond whatever number is actually in your, inside the facility on a given evening, or how many people you might help in a year.
Yeah. And Gary, it even goes beyond that, in a way, because most of the guests that come in, or a lot of them anyway, the family relationships have all been either broken or at best are strained. And, a lot of that, the guests have completely taken advantage of family to the point where the family says,
right.
I'm done with you.
Right.
And so part of our process, obviously, is we want to restore them to Christ. We want to restore them to their family as well.
Right.
And we actually have graduation ceremonies for the folks who graduate from our long-term care program. And oftentimes those include family members, and sometimes it's family members that really haven't connected with them for some quite a long extended period of time.
Yeah. Some of those bridges got burned along the way.
Right. And then to see that reconciliation, and I was at one not very long ago, and his mom was there. And you talked about your mom, and his mom was there. And, his mom was crying, and she was saying, I've been praying for my boy, for 35 years, that he'll find Christ and change his life. And, she got to see the moment where he was professing his faith in Jesus.
It's a story of prayer right there, and how God answers prayer.
Right.
Well, Karl, as we kind of come down to the end today, so I like to ask this question sometimes to our guest, and it's like, was there anything that you were really hoping we would talk about when you thought about this podcast that we haven't talked about yet? Because I want to give you a chance to talk about whatever's like most important to you.
Well, I guess I'll kind of put my donor officer hat on for a second.
Okay, that's fine.
Financial support is terrific for the mission. We're getting ready to go on our Celebrate Hope campaign. which starts October 1st through the end of January. And during that time period, our goal is we'll raise over half of the funds necessary for the mission for the entire fiscal year. So within 4 months, we'll raise all the money, half the money for the entire year, because one, the holiday season is when people think about it the most. It's also when we're heading into the cold season, and for homelessness, that's when most people connected. Right. Although the heat is equally a challenge for folks sometimes. But when it gets cold, we all think, man, I'm glad I'm not outside. So just pray about that. We have great relationships with our churches, and to your point earlier, Gary, we love working with churches. Most of our donors, churches donate to us, but the real value for that is they're allowing us to connect with their members. Right. If you have a group, a Sunday school group, or any kind of organization within your church, we would be thrilled and happy to come down and speak with you. As a matter of fact, back to cityunionmission.org, there's you can go on the website and request a speaker. We love to tell the story about the mission, share what we're doing. And so if there's a church group that needs a topic, we fill it.
Well, now, honestly, that's part of our motivation, Karl, is to say we have this group of 3,000 lights in Kansas City, and we want to continually give them opportunities to help them see beyond, what they might just have in their view every day. And we always think of what we do at Love KC as equipping and releasing. Like we're not like a group that is funneling all of our energies back to ourselves. We're more like a fountain where what's coming out of us blesses others. The seeds we plant grows fruit on other people's trees. And so that's exactly, I'm glad you shared that. That's a good point that you're making. Brooke, is there anything you want to add here before we wrap up today?
I don't think so. I really enjoyed hearing, and it's amazing what you guys are doing. And
thank you. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to tell our story.
Yeah, well, Brooke will follow up with an interview and then write a blog, Karl, and you can use the blog, and you can use this podcast hopefully to help further the story of City Union Mission. And at the same time, it furthers the story of people living on mission wherever they live, learn, work, and play. And Love KC Today is our Facebook page. You can find regular posts there 2 or 3 times a week. And we tell stories just like this about all other kinds of work around the city and encourage people to live on mission. So Karl, thank you. Brooke, thank you.
Thank
you,
Karl.
To those of you who are listening, we just encourage you to keep the story going, pass it on, subscribe to iTunes or Google Play with the Blessed Podcast. And let's keep sharing Jesus everywhere we go. Have a great rest of your week. God bless you.
Thank you for listening from the folks at Love KC. We hope you enjoyed our program. See you next time.